Welcome back, everyone. This story is still developing, but on December 4th, 2024, the CEO of United Healthcare was gunned down by an apparent assassin. Also, Money Mike is back this week. Welcome back, Money Mike. How was your vacation? Give us a rundown.
Thanks so much. It's great to be back. Yeah, I just got back from a quick trip to New York. It was fun. Didn't really do too much. Just bought a jacket, rode an e-bike, and took a quick walk in Central Park. Only issue that I ran into is I did lose my backpack.
Oh, that's too bad. So was it mostly work or like pleasure type thing?
A little bit of both, actually. A little bit of both.
Nice.
But I hated that I missed the last few episodes. Planning the trip was really taking up a lot of my time, but I am happy to be back.
Yeah, you were talking a lot about how much coordination that took, and you kept saying the timing was just too perfect. I didn't want to pry too much into that, but yeah, I'm glad you made it up there, man. Yeah, so I'm going to level with you. I don't necessarily root for people's death all that often, but it didn't take too long to mourn the very hardcore death of Brian Thompson, did it?
Yeah. The reactions that I've seen have ranged from wanton indifference to calls for guillotines in the streets. I really haven't seen a lot of, oh no.
Yeah. What did you see when you were up there? Did you see a lot of that stuff up there too?
Everybody seemed to be pretty jazzed, actually.
Okay. Nice. Good.
Yeah. So,
Good.
that's a thing that happened in our society.
For sure. Yeah, for those of you who didn't hear about this, firstly, thank you so much for clicking on this video just to hear our voices. We love you all. Secondly, Brian Thompson was the CEO of United Healthcare. And as he walked past a hotel in New York, an assassin fired a pretty decisive number of bullets into his back and legs before making his escape into Central Park. At one point, the gun was like, "Stop! What are you doing? I'm a gun! I don't kill people! He's innocent and law-abiding! Don't do this!" And with a decisive smack, the assassin made clear to the gun that he or she, #feminism, was calling the shots. And there's pretty strong evidence that most who watched the footage of this assassination were rooting for the assassin in this little row and wanted him to continue putting holes in this executive. Despite the cries for decency and humanity made by pundits, journalists, and commentators, the motives for killing this man are numerous and tantalizing. Click on any post on Reddit, Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook about this news and marvel as you're presented with a mob of Americans giving a standing ovation for the death of the 50-year-old Brian Thompson and applauding the apparently strikingly attractive assassin.
Dude, he's a hot guy.
He is a hottie, dude. He looks like a Backstreet Boy.
Yeah.
From the left, you see posts mourning loved ones who are denied life-saving care and vitriol aimed at the wealth transfer created by this industry. And on the right, you see men and women mourning loved ones all the same, seemingly taken from them by companies employing the worst of our government's bureaucratic tendencies for profit.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most bipartisan events I think we've had in a long time. Certain pundits have been predictably inflammatory because that's how they make their money. But boy fucking howdy, does it seem like everyone seems to be kind of coming together on this one. And I will say this again throughout this podcast. Neither of us are advocating for murder.
Yeah.
At all.
What's done is done. I mean, you've talked about that Brian Thompson guy a lot. I feel like at this point, what needed to happen happened. You know what I mean?
Jesus Christ. I'm not going to sit here and say murder is good and all of this should be celebrated, but I'm also not going to ignore the reactions that we've seen and ask the question, why are the reactions this way? And why do they seem fairly unanimous with few exceptions?
Yeah. My God, what we have here is the perforated body of a bad man, a hot gunman, according to a few grainy photos.
So hot.
So hot. Some footage of their confrontation, which demonstrates a lot of wherewithal on the part of the gunman with working his way around a gun and navigating the use of that gun, and some footage of this gunman making his getaway on an e-bike. Some locations at which he was seen, a few bus tickets, and 3 bullet casings that read, delay, deny, depose. This is a reference to the book Delay, Deny, Defend, Why Insurance Companies Don't Pay Claims and What You Can Do About It. And I think this is the most on-the-nose part of your work here, his work here.
Gotta stop that, dude. I really is this the podcast version of getting your fucking collaborator swatted? But writing shit on bullet casings before you assassinate someone, that's pretty fucking metal.
So cool.
But and this is pretty much exactly what you just said, Radbill. We are making a ton of inferences. Everybody is. The link to this book, no one's talked to this gunman yet. That is speculation. So we think that we know something, at least about this gunman's intentions. But to Radbill's point, all we have to go off of is the couple pieces of data that Radbill mentioned. And I think that since writing this, a person of interest named Luigi Mangione has been identified, as well as this backpack full of Monopoly money. Which, stop making me root for murderers, dude! Jesus
cooler and cooler! Damn it! We know what the gunman wants us to think about here. And for the most part, we're taking the bait. But we don't know what the actual reason for the clearly planned execution was. We have no bearings on why this was done. And the story behind this conclusion could thwart any efforts towards positive reform or towards anything constructive coming out of this. The story those 3 bullets tell is that someone was denied care by United Healthcare, and they, or a loved one, decided it was time to murder someone for this digression. This notion is what has executives so rattled. Someone was so fed up that one of us died. If they don't catch this guy, he might do it again. And even if they do catch him, who's to say someone else won't get that fed up too? I, Radbill, as far as I know, do not have the gusto to kill anybody under any circumstances. And I think that today's status quo is built around the assumption that everyone else is just like me. What this story suggests is that that is changing. But what if it isn't actually? What if 300 million Americans just don't elevate systemic abuse to murderous retaliation, and this was a calculated and pragmatic murder for hire?
Yeah, just looking at the fact pattern today, we know that he used a fake ID. We know that he paid for everything in cash to obfuscate his path or identity. According to our sources, even though Brian Thompson and his wife weren't divorced, they were separated. And divorce settlements don't pay nearly as well as life insurance claims. So this whole thing could be as boring as rich couples hating each other and loving money enough to commit a murder by proxy.
Yeah, which they've been doing for years now. Rich
They're really
people
good
kill
at
each other all the time for money. Yeah, it's like half of what they do. Half of their crimes are killing each other for money, I feel like. If this was a hit ordered by the wife, we're going back to business as usual. The About pages are going back up, and Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield are moving forward with their plan to cap coverage for anesthesia.
So let me add some context here. Even if this is murder for hire, we've all seen what happens when we thought that somebody killed an insurance executive due to a dissatisfaction with the system. And we saw how hyped everybody got. Honestly, dude, I don't think there's any going back from that. That has said the quiet part out loud. It has illustrated how Americans are feeling, especially about healthcare. So you're right. If this is just murder for hire, it has a smaller impact, but I think that we still see impacts.
We still saw the quiet part spoken aloud.
Yes.
The idea of change emerging from this will be clouded.
Yes.
If it was murder for hire, the idea of executives being held socially responsible for systemic abuse will, to some degree, retreat once again into our collective fantasies, though who knows for how long. The same clouds begin murking up the conclusion here if this murder was contracted or perpetrated by a friend or acquaintance, an investor, or a competitor in the industry. At great speed, things could just go right back to the way they were, and the possibility of even nominal reform in the next 4 years will diminish to some degree.
Very true. Very true. So in any case, for the sake of our podcast, we are going to base the majority of our conversation around the assumptions that A, the person who killed Brian Thompson did so because he was the CEO of United Healthcare, and B, that person thinks that United Healthcare sucks enough that being their CEO is a capital crime.
Yeah, this is really only interesting if it's a crime of passion. If that's the case, this represents a daunting challenge to the security those heading this industry have felt for decades. And it begs the question, could other executives be in danger?
Very true. So let's talk a little bit about UHC, and then let's talk about Brian. I would say that we're going to put Brian on crutches, but he seems a little past that point. So I'm Money Mike.
And I'm Radbill.
And this is from the Jesus of the people. All right. So why are we doing this again?
Yeah, why is PvP making a little foray into true crime?
Well, this whole thing just fits so neatly into our little podcast. And the crossover of true crime and our PvP thing is bringing a giddiness to my voice that honestly concerns me.
It almost feels manufactured by us.
It does. But wait, fuck, God damn it.
I'll stop. I'll cut it out. So.
I want to talk about UHC, United Healthcare, and their parent company, UHG, United Health Group.
Yes, as mentioned, Brian Thompson is the name of the man doing the dancing in that footage.
Oh, fuck.
To quote an article quoting a 2021 statement announcing his appointment to the CEO role for United Healthcare, he was responsible for leading growth across the company's global, employer, individual, specialty, and government benefits businesses. Now, if the decision to kill this man is the result of United Healthcare denying claims, then the question is answered. If this is meant to protest the industry's conduct as a whole, I gotta tell you, I feel like United Healthcare is still a pretty reasonable target.
Yeah. So United Healthcare is a subsidiary of United Health Group, which is the largest healthcare corporation in the world, currently ranking number 8 on the Fortune 500. Yeah, these motherfuckers are in the Fortune 10. And they are also the parent of Optum, which is a health provider that also specializes in data services, which sounds a little bit like a monopoly, doesn't it?
It kind of does.
Weird. So yeah, UHG is a towering corporate monstrosity that employs over 400,000 people and seems to have a line of business for every step of medical care in the United States, from providing it, paying for it, and amassing, and hopefully not selling, all of the data associated with those services. Now, of course, it's far more complex than that, but we don't really see a ton of value in getting into the nitty-gritty for the sake of our story.
Yes. Part 1. How we're told to fit into the insurance part of our healthcare system. The health insurance industry, on average, denies 1 in 7 claims, which is a horrifying figure. To their defense, or to contextualize this a little bit, a lot of these denials are supposedly for off-label uses, which make up 1 in 5 prescriptions today. Meaning that a doctor has prescribed a drug to treat or prevent symptoms that weren't specifically listed on the drug's label.
Which sounds scary, but then you have to realize that Viagra was a blood pressure medication first. So that happens all the time, and it should.
Yeah, in these cases, the doctor is practicing what's known as medicine by relying on their own expertise and on what is observed while working with the patient firsthand.
United Healthcare denies 32% of claims.
Yeah. In defending their own practices, insurance companies have claimed that for the best results, Doctors and insurers need to work together to deliver evidence-based care and avoid treatments that are inappropriate, unnecessary, and more costly. When insurance companies see treatment prescribed that doesn't follow established guidelines, they need more information. To quote the same trade group advocate I just quoted with the doctors and insurers need to work together line, most often, a claim that is not immediately approved just requires the provider to submit additional information to appropriately document the request, such as the diagnosis or other details. If a claim is not approved after correct and complete information is submitted, there are several levels of appeals available to the patient and to their provider. So easy enough. In cases of wrongful denials, 1 in every 7 Americans just needs to appeal. If you have United, the odds of a claim being denied are, again, closer to 1 in 3. Despite these numbers, less than 2 in every 1,000 patients ever file an appeal. So, ProPublica, we're going to be doing a whole lot of talking about their work today, tasked a journalist with creating a guide for doing just that, filing appeals. After speaking with 50 insurance experts, Cheryl Clark, the journalist I just mentioned, realized that creating a digestible guide for filing appeals is impossible. She closes the article by recommending that upon signing up for new commercial health insurance, customers should ask for the full plan document. This will be around 100 pages of fine print, which is absurd, but within these 100 pages is a step-by-step guide to appealing, reappealing, and reappealing a denial. Medicare Advantage and Medicaid denial letters will explain the steps to appeal, so hold on to those. Also, when possible, the help of your medical provider can go a great distance. Sometimes your health insurance will deny a claim because your doctor or their office submitted it under the wrong code, which is a pretty easy fix. Lastly, based on her research, Cheryl advises that consumers report and complain to the relevant authorities whenever their providers act with impropriety. In the wake of this, whatever you want to call it, Robert Pape, director of the University of Chicago's Project on Security and Threats, was quoted in an article written by The Guardian saying that what he sees here is an erosion of norms. He continues, that means basically seeing violence as the more normal tool or acceptable tool to resolve what should be straightforward civil disputes resolved in nonviolent ways. To Pape's point, all of this appeal stuff sounds like a fucking nightmare, but so long as everyone operates in good faith, it sounds like what we have here is a workable system. Enter Christopher McNaughton.
Chapter 2. How it really works. Okay, so Brian Thompson was at the helm of a massive health insurance corporation that might wield a questionable amount of power and has some questionably complex processes. But whatever did that corporation do that might make someone go Punisher on their CEO in the streets of Manhattan? Well, kind of a lot. Seriously, their criticisms and controversies tab on Wikipedia is longer than one of their full plan documents.
Yes, it is. It's giant. As mentioned in our last insurance episode, United Healthcare contracted with Evacor, a company that makes its money helping insurance companies maximize profits during the claims and payout process. Carillon and Evacor both do this kind of work for companies like United Healthcare.
That sounds like good, honest work where no one could get hurt. But anyway, yes. Instead of rehashing the last McKinsey episode or dragging you through a montage where all of the injustice just washes over you, we're going to share a fascinating story that ProPublica put out a few years ago about the battle waged between a college student named Christopher McNaughton and United Healthcare. The article is fascinating, and I highly encourage all of our listeners to read or listen to it because not only is it an excellent expose of how healthcare works, it also contains some really actionable advice about how to fight health insurance after they reject a claim, which the article points out is something that literally only happens 0.1% of the time, as Radbill said earlier. Seriously, 1 out of every 1,000 rejections ever sees a formal appeal. That is
It's unbelievable.
Bananas. It's fucking bananas. So, on to the story. Like I said earlier, Chris was a college student that was insured by a United Healthcare plan provided by his school, Penn State, where one of his parents was also on faculty. Now, if you've gone to college, you were probably enrolled in a similar plan. Apparently, these are cash cows for insurance companies. Lots of young, healthy participants that are going to be paying premiums in and not really making many claims except with that one case where you get the clap on spring break and those meds are pretty cheap.
Penicillin. In you go.
Chris, however, was unlike the normal college students in the sense that a few years before he enrolled in 2020, he developed severe ulcerative colitis, which fucking sucks.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, you've seen commercials for these medications for ulcerative colitis. It's the one where you know, they're just showing concerts and life events and family reunions from within the walls of a porta-john, a bathroom stall, or just what is very obviously a bathroom.
Yeah, there's a lot of shitting blood with ulcerative colitis, and it opens the door to a lot of really nasty, life-threatening ailments. You're welcome to look it up on your own. It sucks, it can be life-threatening, and treatment is tough. So in his search for relief, Chris's doctor referred him to a specialist that prescribed him a biologic therapy, which results in an ongoing, sometimes perpetual treatment of much higher doses of more expensive drugs than less severe cases. And while this therapy was doing wonders for Chris's body, they weren't doing any favors for United Healthcare's balance sheet. Once Chris was enrolled in their plan in 2020, drugs for him were costing United Healthcare about $2 million a year, which they were super not chill about. Eventually, Chris popped up on a list of high-dollar accounts because, of course, that's a thing. And in no time, his drug regimen was reviewed by a doctor contracted with United Healthcare because, again, that's a thing. And his aggressive drug regimen was deemed not medically necessary. And there's a phone call between a nurse working for United named Victoria Kavanagh, and I might be butchering your name, Victoria, and if I did, good, fuck you.
Yeah, fuck you, Victoria Kavagadag.
And one of their healthcare brokers, David Opperman, discussing the case. And Opperman, in this recording, laughs after hearing the news that Chris's medical treatment was not going to be covered and says, I knew that was going to happen. Apparently, medical necessity is where private insurers have a ton of leeway to essentially just get out of paying for shit. Radbill mentioned this earlier, the whole Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield deciding that anesthesia after a certain time limit isn't medically necessary, so they're going to cap it. Same mechanism. Once the claim was formally rejected, Chris's parents did something a little out of the ordinary. They went fucking apeshit.
They got mad.
They got very mad.
That part's normal, but
Yeah, I don't usually support going full Karen, but when the insurance company says, I'm not paying for that shit, when you have insurance, I think that you get a pass. However, what his parents did that even fewer people do after going full apeshit is they brought United Healthcare a fucking lawsuit.
Yeah.
And there are few magnifying glasses as punitive as those wielded by lawyers. And boy fucking howdy did the McNaughton's legal team find some shit. Pertaining to Chris's case alone, they found that, and I'm just going to quote here to be safe, United inaccurately reported to Penn State and the family that McNaughton's doctor had agreed to lower the doses of his medication, which sounds an awful lot like blatant fraud.
Deadly blatant fraud.
Yes. A doctor paid by United concluded that failing to pay for McNaughton's treatment could put his health at risk. The company buried these findings. Instead, they considered a report by a company doctor that okayed the recommendation of Victoria to reject paying for the treatment.
Yeah, just to put this into context with biologics, especially for McNaughton's case, The higher dose of biologics was working wonders, but because of the way the human body adapts to these drugs, if you lower the dose, your body can build an immunity to where the higher dose later on will never work again. And at the lower dose they tried, Chris was still bedridden with this condition at the lower dose. The higher dose, he was suddenly able to resume a modicum of an ordinary life. He was suddenly going back to school, which he had to leave when this disease really took a full grasp.
Yeah, to take that even further, McNaughton's doctor, his name is Dr. Loftus, he had tried lower doses. He's a doctor. You know, doctors start with the least amount of care and then titrate up. That's how it works.
Yeah, no doctor starts by blasting you with painkillers and then lowers the dose. Even in our very worst medical tendencies with OxyContin, it was lower dose to higher dose.
Yeah.
That's kind of just how you do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Another common trick employed by insurance companies is just acting like they never received the paperwork when the doctors call to check on it. An Albuquerque, New Mexico doctor, Barbara McEnany, runs a practice where they have a designated department to address insurance denials that costs her office $350,000 each year.
Jesus Christ.
They tend to 67 denials a day on average, and apparently they often have to send records 2 or 3 times before the insurance company admits they've received them. Again, the common refrain from the people they speak with at the insurance company is, we didn't get it. It didn't make it to us yet.
Like, deny, defend. Anyway, so then after this lawsuit and a bunch of conference calls, United finally breaks and they agree to pay for Chris's existing drug regimen throughout the end of the school year. Remember, this is a treatment, not a cure. Chris can't just stop taking these drugs. So a month later, Chris's case is back in front of our favorite nurse who's forgotten that she doesn't work at the DMV but is instead in charge of placing herself between people and their medical care, Victoria Kavanagh. Dude, I looked this bitch up on LinkedIn to see if her face was as annoying as her voice, but I'm assuming that she probably deleted her LinkedIn after this article came out. And if she didn't, she definitely deleted it after all that shit went down in Manhattan. But anyway, Victoria thinks that the only reason that United is paying for the current year is because Penn State is, quote, a big client of ours. On a call, Kavanagh said the following: "This is really a case of a kid who's getting a drug way too much, like too much of a dose." End quote, new quote. "To be honest with you, they're awfully pushy considering that we're paying through the end of the school year." Like she works at a fucking charity. What the fuck, crazy. Victoria? You're not doing this out of the goodness of your heart. You're providing a service that was paid for. Do you know what insurance is? Anyway, so she sends this case to an organization called the Medical Review Institute of America, who gets involved in cases like this. And they send it to Dr. Vikas Pabby. Might be butchering your name, Vikas, and I'm moderately sorry, who is a gastroenterologist. Pabby reviewed Chris's case, along with 300 others that month, for which he was compensated a cool $23,000, and he decided, nah, not medically necessary. So, after this rejection, Kavanagh and Opperman, the broker, decide that appealing this whole thing is pointless. So they decide to have Pabby, United's doctor, have a little powwow with Chris's doctor, Dr. Loftus. Essentially, so Dr. Loftus can persuade Dr. Pabby that Chris's treatment is medically necessary. And yes, this is a thing that happens all the time. I'm sure it's bringing a smile to your face to know that. And weirdly enough, when Kavanagh called Dr. Loftus's office to set up the whole sit-down, she told Dr. Loftus that it was Chris who had requested this peer-to-peer review. Chris didn't even know that his claim was rejected at this point and had never spoken to Kavanagh in his life, even though she indicated that she had, quote, had just gotten to know Christopher.
How is this not criminal? Anyways, sorry.
Right. So this little fucking mafia sit down happens. And afterwards, old Dr. Pabby was a changed man. He amended his initial report that the drugs weren't necessary to instead believe that the drugs were necessary, but at much lower doses.
A sort of meet in the middle type thing.
Yeah, we make compromises when it comes to treating diseases. So then Opperman, the broker, sends Chris an email that said that Loftus and Pabby had agreed that Loftus would start titrating Chris down to a lower dose. Loftus never said that. He said the exact opposite. Like I said earlier, they started Chris on lower doses. Lower doses didn't work. It was only after questioning from Chris's lawyers that Kavanaugh admitted that she fibbed, essentially, about knowing Chris and setting up this whole thing.
Yeah, whoopsie daisies, my mistake.
Yeah, this is another crack for it to fall through. Like Radbill was alluding to earlier, their job is to create cracks for things to fall through.
Bingo. That's it. This is designed to discourage most people from trekking further and to make an example of the people who get this far.
Well said. And we are far. We are lawyers in the room far.
Yeah.
And they're still creating these cracks. So Chris gets the news and says, fuck you, which is not something that you should have to say to a company that you're paying money to. He says, fuck you. Yeah. We tried this. It didn't work. I want it reviewed again. So then the case goes to a doctor who was actually employed by United instead of contracted by United, named Dr. Nady Cates, who had not practiced medicine since the early 90s, literally 30 years prior to this event, and he had never practiced in gastroenterology. When Nady was asked about his role, he said that he was there to make sure that, quote, there wasn't a decimal place that was out of line. He copied his recommendation to reject Chris's claim from a United nurse's recommendation. And he admitted in a deposition that he never even considered Chris's doctor's opinion at all. Never even read it.
Yeah.
And also, fun little tidbit, the article talks about why Dr. Cates got out of medicine in the 90s. He said that it was because AIDS was becoming a big thing and he didn't want to be exposed to it. Whoa.
Cool guy. Sounds like my kind of doctor.
Yeah, real chill. Anyway, so simultaneously, while this review is occurring, another doctor at the Medical Review Institute, Dr. Kumar, was also reviewing Chris's case. And he concluded that Dr. Loftus's original treatment plan was absolutely medically necessary, and he cited 6 medical studies to back it up. However, instead of taking this review into consideration, our girl Kavanaugh brought this to her supervisor, who suggested that they just send the case back to Dr. Pabby, who just seemed to have a hard-on for rejecting it. In fact, Kavanaugh didn't even save a copy of the supporting report, nor did she share it with anybody else. She fucking buried it. United didn't even send it to Chris's lawyers during discovery. They unearthed it on accident. And Kavanaugh's excuse was that Dr. Kumar wasn't technically assigned to the case, so she didn't even read his report, which is technically true, but bruh.
Well, who are we doing this for?
Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, oh my God. It is now June 2021, a year after this whole fiasco had begun. United let Chris know that they weren't going to cover the cost of his regimen above the normal regimen of drugs for the next school year. In August, Chris filed a federal lawsuit accusing United of acting in bad faith and essentially choosing profit over his health. Come September, he filed for a temporary restraining order to make United pay for the duration of the whole legal proceedings. With threat of a hearing looming, United complied to pay through the 21-22 school year. So as of the publication of this article, it sounds like Chris and United settled out of court. Chris said he's going to Penn State's law school so he can represent people like him who are at risk of being murdered by companies who prioritizes profits over people.
That's almost the name of this show.
Weird how that works. Yeah, so, gang, there's been an awful lot of rhetoric going around about insurance companies killing people. But when you read cases like this, it's really not hyperbole. It took multiple lawsuits for Chris to get the care that he needed. And had his family not been able to afford what I'm assuming was a crippling legal bill at the outset, as well as having parents on the staff of the school with which United had a big contract, his health outcomes would probably have been far worse. And if they hadn't been far worse, it would have cost him millions of dollars a year to get the care that he needed.
Yeah, when they first denied his claim, they said, hey, we're not covering this medication regimen for this month or the past 3 months, which means you owe $900,000. Full disclosure, my wife suffers from a chronic condition, and the medication doctors have prescribed as treatment costs over $10,000 each month. Now, while this is appalling enough, our health insurance provider, to whom we pay several $100s each month and have done so for years, fought viciously to avoid paying for these drugs, forcing us to incur, thousands of dollars in debt, while she weathered the symptoms of her condition and the rugged side effects of this very necessary drug. I can feel my face reddening while I say this. Yeah. While I watched the corporation badger and bully my wife at the start of each month and fight desperately to leave us in the cold, I don't know that I would ever act on it, but I conjured vivid fantasies about how I would go about assailing and really murdering the people in suits, doing this to her and to us. I empathize with Brian Thompson's family, but when I imagine watching my wife continue to suffer, or worse yet, losing my wife to the bureaucracy of a service that I pay a fortune for, I can't help but resonate with the killer's actions. It feels like we're hitting an inflection point here, and I don't know what I'm advocating for specifically, but it definitely isn't allowing a return to the status quo.
Yeah, dude, first of all, that is so fucked up, and I'm so sorry that you've been so directly affected. But when we're asking the question, what has United Healthcare ever done that might someone get homicidal? These are 2 of tens of thousands of stories just like it. And these stories have better endings than most of the stories that we're not telling.
Yeah, both of these stories end with everyone still being alive.
Yes. So the whole idea that one of the people touched by this cancerous system got angry enough to commit homicide is just kind of not that statistically crazy to think about, you know?
It's not. I want to be careful to not speak about this in terms of justice, but to instead speak of this in terms of consequences. I don't think that Brian Thompson's murder was justified, but it's believed that the gunman or gunner, #feminism, took lethal action against Brian as revenge for the insurance company's conduct. And if the gunman lost a relative as a result of United Healthcare's evasion of their responsibility to alleviate financial constraints, I think you'd be hard-pressed to convince me that this response isn't proportional. Outside of the institutional cases, death is often the result of making decisions that end other people's lives. And this company, through willful inaction, kills people all the time. I will not cheer for murder, but I will not balk when the head of a murderous company is held socially responsible for his actions and executed in the street. The crazy thing is this. It is very evident that I'm not on an island with that thought process and that mentality.
Yeah, if what I have seen on the internet is any indication of the collective conscious, no, you are not. And one thing that I do want to touch on before we move on is we kind of have answered the question, why does United Healthcare suck? I don't think that we need to beat that horse anymore.
Yeah.
But some of you might still be thinking, okay, well, why Brian? Why the CEO? What did he do? Why would someone think that Brian deserves this demise? First, Brian makes a lot of money to be the face of United Healthcare. Like a lot of money. I think I saw somewhere he was worth somewhere between $30 and $50 million.
I think he nets 10 a year. Yeah.
He nets $10 million a year. And The whole shtick with being at the top is you get to be responsible for everything. Even when some of those things might be outside of your control, that's what you're being paid for.
You're the face of the organization.
Yes. But in Brian's case, he was at the helm when United Healthcare started using AI-driven rejections for claims.
Yeah.
And I don't want to talk too much about that because Radbill has a whole episode on McKinsey and how their robots are killing people. But that happened under Brian Thompson's watch. Brian Thompson said, let's institute this, and was okay with the consequences.
Yeah, just while I'm thinking about it, Spectrum Woes, I hope this was a sufficient amount of this. We love you. Thanks for listening. One thing this has shown me is the vast and incredible disconnect between the extravagantly wealthy and the rest of us. Time and time again in Reddit threads and on Twitter, I've seen articles titled something like, "What does this mean for our country?" And I want to say to the author, are you shitting me? Problems with healthcare are all any normal person in this godforsaken country talks about. It's all anyone's talking about. Someone without fail will explain in response to that comment in one way or another that the people who run the show just have no idea what's going on down here. They have no grasp of where their money comes from or what their paycheck costs the rest of us. We live in two separate worlds. We have the most astounding medical treatments humanity has ever known, and our doctors offer them before a disembodied voice calls or writes to say that although the treatment exists, we just can't have it. And sometimes there just isn't a good reason. There's nothing. Oops, the paperwork got lost 3 times in a row. These companies enrich themselves by standing between Americans and the medical miracles of our day, and a very attractive assailant just cleared the sidewalk and they're all scratching their heads. Welcome back to the ground floor. As it turns out, the impunity offered by our modern surveillance state is just as flimsy as the miracles offered by modern medicine when all the money is in the hands of a few and the rest of us are growing desperate. None of us are as safe as we were led to believe. For CEOs and executives, there are 2 paths out of this that will afford some peace of mind. One is to improve transparency and hold yourselves socially accountable so that people with the capacity to murder you don't take up the mantle. I hate to tell you, but if you do bad shit, you might get murdered for it, particularly on this scale. Solution 2 is to increase arbitrariness, up security, and eliminate measures that would otherwise be used to hold you accountable. But here's the thing. Tools of the capital class are online just the same, and they're publicly available. If I want to get there with the help of the internet, I can get to your front door with a 4th grade reading level. You will never be able to scrub yourself from the internet entirely. You're off the About Us page. You can abstain from interviews and events and delete your LinkedIn, but you ain't getting out of the 10Ks, 8Ks, and shareholder presentations. As has been the case for so long, your downfall will be the accountability you owe to your shareholders and the fact that surrounding yourself with a mobile TSA spells out a hellish lifestyle.
Yeah, which would sound an awful lot like a threat if you didn't know Radbill, but he is not doing that.
I'm not doing any of this stuff, and neither is Mike.
No, none of that. The fact of the matter is, and Radbill, you kind of touched on this, health insurance is one of so many pillars right now that are begging for change. I don't want to turn this into a macroeconomic comparison between conditions preceding violent uprisings in the past and those that exist in the U.S. today, but I don't think I'm really grasping at straws here when I say that most people don't tend to resort to violence until it seems like the only possible option to improve their lives.
After recording this episode, we came across a piece of advice from Raheli. I'm sorry if I'm botching your name, Raheli, at raheli.bluesky.social. It reads as follows, thought it was relevant. To everyone in a similar scenario, the tactic my doctor's office has taught me is to ask, in writing from the insurance company, 1, the name, board specialty, and license number of the doctor making the determination the treatment was not medically necessary. 2. Copies of all materials they relied on to make their determination. 3. Proof the doctor making the determination has maintained registration in your specific state and documentation of their meeting all their continuing education requirements. 4. The aggregate rate at which similar treatments are denied versus approved by the specific doctor being used for peer review. You are not entitled by law to all of these things in most states, but you're entitled to some of them, and you can always ask for them. This is, the doctor told Raheli, a wildly successful tactic because if the insurance company answers these questions honestly, it gives you evidence that the doctors, quote unquote, making these determinations are practicing medicine out of scope, without proper licensing and qualification in areas they are not competent in. Everyone knows this is true. It's not a secret in any way, but it's in violation of a number of regulations, and a lot of times the company will just give up and pay the bill rather than handing you proof they're violating the regulations. It's a tactic that has worked for me many, many times. End quote.
When things like food and shelter have become 21% more expensive since 2020, that's not good. According to a 2019 report, this is before the pandemic, from Charles Schwab, 59% of Americans were one paycheck away from homelessness. And I think that what this assassination is proving to people is that regardless of their political affiliation, what they might agree or disagree on, people on a large scale in one of the most developed countries in the world are struggling. And what history shows us is that when too many people suffer enough, instability ensues. And instability really isn't good for anyone, historically speaking. And, another really important thing that we have to remember is Brian Thompson, like we said, was worth $50 million. That is a day of stock market fluctuations for Elon Musk. Like, he is not at the oligarch level yet.
He is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah. So I don't know what I'm trying to say when I say that, but I really want there to be a way to fix this within our existing system. But kind of to Radbill's point, it's not up to me.
Yeah. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Like, comment, subscribe. Give us a thing on YouTube. Like, we could use some more attention on there.
Yeah.
But anyways, drop us a line on our subreddit if you have questions, comments, if you liked the episode.
Also, I keep forgetting to say this. We have a Instagram now. It is very much in its infancy, but like I've done the work to make it and then just never talked about it. So yeah, look us up on Instagram. Profitvspeeps.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and
goodbye.